this that in fact family planning could contribute and did contribute significantly to maternal mortality. And so if you people, from the women's community are so interested in questions of women's health and so on and so forth, family planning is your path, is your route. I think in the intervening years since then, we've come through, most convoluted routes by which, in fact, we have ended up, at least in this country, in the position where now we are talking about the relationship between maternal mortality and human rights. I call the path convoluted, and I'm hoping in today's discussions we'll have some opportunity for talking about the ups and downs of that path, because it has been convoluted. It hasn't always gone in the directions that we would have wanted. And maternal mortality pops up in, out of the picture, quite often different people using it for their own purposes and for different reasons, in ways that, if we're not vigilant, can sometimes be problematic as much as they can be helpful. I'm not going to go into that, as I said today, but I thought that in the light of Paul Hunt's report, which is what we are here to really talk about today, that given that many people in the room will actually, during the course of the day, address specifically different aspects of the report and where and how we might build on it and take it forward, that I would just set out some of what I think are critical principles that I think are important in how we think about how we might use this report and how we might move forward with this report. In order to do that, however, I just want to present to you a case based on the work that we've been doing in northern Karnataka, a very poor district, the district of Koppal, for now close to 10 years, where we've been working essentially, among other things, but principally to bring about a reduction in maternal deaths and maternal illnesses. And in the process of doing that, among the things that we do is in fact our own very, very detailed verbal autopsies of every death that happens in the villages within which we are working. That's a whole separate story. And suffice it to say, and I'll come back briefly because one of Paul's points is in fact the nature of verbal autopsies and how they should be done. And I'll come back to that therefore at the end. But I just want to present this case to you from there because I think this case, a death that happened in February of this year, so well after the NRHM had actually taken off in the district of Koppal, epitomizes in a number of ways the challenges that actually exist, both for government and for civil society in tying maternal mortality and morbidity issues closely and strongly to human rights, and what are the kinds of issues that come up. So let me, bear with me, and I will just, I don't have a PowerPoint, but I will, I just want to talk about this case. The woman's name was the wonderful name, and in Koppal they have these beautiful long northern Karnataka names. Malama Basavantappa Gadi. And she was from the village of Arkeri. Arkeri was her marital home, and she was, at the time of her death, she was not young. She was 30 years old. Who was she? She was an illiterate woman, but had, despite everything, both her illiteracy and quite serious poverty, had learned how to write her name, and apparently was very proud of the fact that she could write her name. She had been in the villages within which we were working, That's a whole separate story. And suffice it to say, and I'll come back briefly because one of Paul's points is in fact the nature of verbal autopsies and how they should be done. And I'll come back to that therefore. Present this case to you from there because I think this case, a death that happened in February of this year, so well after the NRHM had actually taken off in the district of Koppal, married around the age of 15, a very common phenomenon in northern Karnataka, and as we know, still in many parts of India, about half the population of girls gets married still around that age. She had, and her husband had moved to this village of Arkeri with their 3 living daughters, after that village got submerged by the waters of the Hirehala Dam around 10 years ago. They did get compensation for that, but the family and in fact the entire village was pretty much uprooted and had to move. The family was broken up and her in-laws went off to live in one area and she went to live in another. For Koppal, that's very unusual because as is true in many of the large dry zones of India, nuclear families are not the norm and joint, large, extended families are extremely important in actually making it possible for women in particular to be able to share work, to share resources, to be able to manage in times of hardship and so on. So the breakup of the family was, I think, probably a major issue for them. And Malama herself did wage work, did housework, did everything, all of the things that you would expect a woman like that to do. Her elder daughters would help her, but not her husband. She earned, when she worked as a daily wage laborer, she earned about 70 rupees a day. Her husband earned 100, but gave her very little of it because he was alcoholic and spent most of it on drink. The relationship between husband and wife was not apparently violent as such, but there was a lot of tension, physical violence. Yeah, what I mean is he didn't beat her up. When you ask the question, what was it like, that's the first thing you'll be told. No, he never beat her up, he was okay. Now, if you look back at her reproductive history and her pregnancy history, she had gotten pregnant for the first time, again, as is very common, married at the age of 15, around the age of 16 or 17 or so. The first child was a son, and then after that, the next 3 were daughters. And as far as we could tell, she had had no prior abortions or stillbirths, but then, that's always has to be taken. That kind of information is always subject to. She didn't really have any major problems from what the family told us in previous pregnancies. Now here comes the next bit. Malama did not want the current pregnancy because of all of the burdens that she already had, and she was not into the son-wanting business. And she was also very much afraid that this one would also end up with a daughter, which would make her position even worse than it already was. And what she did, in fact, was to try in a number of ways to actually abort the fetus. And she tried it, I think, about 3 or 4 times that she went back and forth to try and get an abortion. In a safe abortion, an unsafe abortion, and none of it worked. And she ended up, in fact, having to carry the pregnancy, and by the time of her last attempt, she was in her 5th month, and then the doctor said, no, I'm not going to do it anymore. I'm not even going to try, it's not safe, etc. You can imagine what her situation was in terms of her nutritional status, in terms of her anemia status, none of which, of course, was seriously recorded anywhere in all of the ANC checkups that she had. and which she actually took seriously.